Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, that is right, my friends. Sorry for the delay there, talking with Oz a little bit about something before I turned on the microphone today. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, boy. Busy weekend. Happy Mother's Day. I didn't say anything about that Friday. I should have. I'll say that today, my friends. Happy Mother's Day. Talk about that just for a bit. Talk a little bit. I got to do a little bit of, it's not bragging. It's just a little bit of celebration. The Pacers up 3-1. This has been an unbelievable series for the Indiana Pacers. Got all sorts of things in the news about Trump, from pharmaceutical and prescription drug prices to trade deals with China, as Trump would say. And folks, this is what we knew was coming. This hopefully could be the beginning of the part of the cycle of Trump's presidency where America begins to truly reap some very, very good things. And it is much, much deserved and necessary for this great nation to be revitalized. And so that's where we're going today. That's what we're going to talk about. And thank you for joining us today, my friends. All right, so before I get into that, let me tell you a little bit about my friends at Kenai Fish. They are a family-owned company bringing you the absolute best wild-caught Alaskan seafood. We're talking salmon straight from the world-famous Kenai and Castle Bluff rivers. It's sockeye salmon, coho salmon, king salmon. They've also got halibut that comes from the Gulf of Alaska, not to be confused with the Gulf of Mexico. By the way, I saw Mexico is suing, who was it, Google Maps, about calling it the Gulf of America and not the Gulf of Mexico. That's a side note, but this halibut comes from the Gulf of Alaska. It's mild, it's sweet, it's perfect for grilling, baking, or even air frying. You know, saying this about Alaska, have you seen, and I know you don't think this, but do you know anybody who thinks Alaska and Hawaii are in, on a map? They'll put a map, and they'll put, just so we can see states, the 49th and 50th states, so we can see those in kind of one snapshot of the contiguous 48 states. They'll put Alaska and Hawaii underneath, kind of over Mexico. There are people out there who quite literally believe that Alaska and Hawaii, that's where they're located, which is, I don't even know. Have you never seen a globe in your life? Are you not familiar with the size of the Pacific Ocean? Are you not familiar with Canada being between the continental United States and Alaska? Anyway, but this is coming from the waters of Alaska, up there, the Gulf of Alaska, the Kenai Castle Bluff rivers. It's fresh stuff. It's delicious. It's as good as you're going to get when it comes to seafood. And they've got things like king crab, snow crab, rockfish, scallops, you name it, my friends. A whole lot of delicious seafood. It's all sustainably harvested. Comes in vacuum sealed packages for freshness, and it's shipped via next day air right to your door. Kenai Fish, my friends, is a quality provider of seafood, and it gets to you quickly. All you have to do is go to KenaiFish.com, Kenai Fish.com. Again, that's spelled Kenai Fish, Fish.com. KenaiFish.com. Use promo code Todd. You will save 15% on your order. All right, my friends. One taste of this seafood, you'll be hooked, by the way. I want to start. What do I want to start? I got so many things bouncing around in my head as where I want to start today. But I do want to start for a moment with the Indiana Pacers. On Friday, I left you and I said, look, the series was 2-0 Indiana. I said, there's three options. When we come back on Monday, I said we're either going to have a Indiana Pacers sweep, which I didn't think was likely, a 3-1 Indiana series lead, or a 2-2 series tie going back to Cleveland, and they play tomorrow night, Game 5 in Cleveland. I thought it would be 3-1. I had it flipped, though. I thought we would win Game 3, and I thought that they would beat us in Game 4. Turns out the opposite happened. These were two blowout games. The Pacers played atrociously on Friday night. Friday night's when they played. They were never in that. The Cavs dominated. It was a butt kicking, to be quite honest. Then last night, Game 4, big game, right? I mean, Indiana, the Pacers here, if we would have left here with a 2-2 tie, we would have had to beat them on their home court again to win this series. Of course, a 2-2 series tie could go any number of directions at that particular point, going at least, guaranteed at that point, 6 games. But we, the Pacers, I say we. I'm one of these old school fans. I do say we, because as much emotional investment as I've made into this team over the course of this season, I feel like I'm in the locker room with them, my friends. But anyway, we came out and we were clicking on all cylinders. In fact, the halftime lead, it was absolutely amazing. 80-39 was the halftime score. The Pacers were up 41 points at halftime. I mean, look, it's I don't want to say impossible, but virtually impossible at that point for Cleveland to win that game. They would have had to had two 20-point advantages in each of the third and the fourth quarters respectively in order to beat us, to come back and defeat us. And of course that wasn't in the cards. Pacers only ended up winning by 20, but it was an unbelievable basketball game. And it's remarkable to me. I feel a little bit, and this will segue nicely. Well, a couple of other things I want to get to, but this will segue nicely when I want to talk about what Trump's doing. I feel a little bit like the Pacers are disrespected. Actually, I feel that a lot, which I don't care. I don't say that from a position of whining about it. I don't care what team the media likes, what team people think's going to win this, that, or the other. It makes no difference to me. As I tell my kids, that's why they play the game, right? You always hear people at the beginning of these series, a team can't do this, that, or the other. And I think, well, that's why they play the game. And I realized that, I had that mentality when I was a player 150 years ago. And I don't think I knew that when I was a high school kid. I always thought that. I never stepped on the field. This is going to sound crazy, but I don't know. I never thought this way. I never stepped onto the court, basketball court, or the football field, or the track meet, thinking I wasn't going to win. It is never, that may sound ridiculous, I don't know. But it never entered my mind. I was out there to win. That's why we're running the race. That's why we're lacing them up. That's why we're, doing the tip-off here. We're going to see who's going to win. I knew we had some very formidable opponents from time to time, but I always thought that if things went our way, we could win a game. And the older I've gotten, the more I've realized that people in general do not think like that. I actually think, as I look back, I'm not sure how many teammates I had that thought the same thing. I've always been, maybe some of you would say, overly optimistic, and that's fine. You can think that. But as Zig Ziglar used to say, he would be the one to jump in the rowboat, go fishing for Moby Dick, and bring the tartar sauce. That's kind of how I approach things. And so, but it's not a common thing. And of course, there's haters. There's people who don't like the Pacers for any number of reasons. There's people that don't like Trump as well. This is going to segue, I think, together here. But I do think there's similarities. There's similarities if you pay attention to the Pacers and watch them all season as I did. They started off the season 10-15. I think they said since New Year's Day, I believe it was, the Pacers are 41-16. They were on pace to be a 60-win team. This is a 60-win team, even though they didn't hit that. They won 50 games. This is the team that's good enough to win 60. The Pacers started off poorly. They had some injuries. They had some things that weren't working in their advantage. They went through a slump. I feel like there was a part of the season Halliburton wasn't playing right or playing well. I think he's through that now. Of course, taking over and just willing game number 2 into a Pacer victory. But, I just think that there's similarities. And I feel like, people don't take the Pacers seriously. The team from Indiana. What's a team from Indiana know? It doesn't have the name of a superstar. And in fact, the one superstar, one of the couple potential superstars we have, one of them is voted, and Tyrese Halliburton, the most overrated player in the NBA. And so there's this mentality, we're not a big market. We don't have any big names. We started off the season poorly. We don't have a superstar, a LeBron James, a Victor Wembanyama, a Donovan Mitchell, Jason Tatum, a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. We don't have a Nikola Jokic. We don't have that type of player, but we've got 10 guys, maybe even more than that on any given night can score 20 points. And from a team basketball perspective, and from an unselfish team, it doesn't matter that doesn't care who gets the credit, I should say. Great things can happen. And I feel like there's similarities here. Now, Trump wants to get the credit. Don't misunderstand me. And part of that's Trump's nature, but part of that's also Trump fighting with the media who have neither properly diagnosed the cause of the problems that we're dealing with in this country today, or properly identified what the solution is. See, it's one thing if Trump comes into office and fixes things dramatically, and it's another thing if the American people understand what it was that made that change. Because, see, here's the problem, and this is always in the back of my mind. Now, this is where the optimist in me wrestles with the very practical, almost pessimist side of me. I think, we're getting these victories, but they're assigning the media. The media doesn't give the true credit where the credit is due. And so what happens? I don't mean it. Look, I don't care about Trump's ego, that perspective. I'm saying from the perspective of the American people knowing what it is that caused these problems so that we avoid those things, but also the American people knowing when these problems exist, how they are fixed. And I don't want to say worry, but it concerns me. It concerns me that a lot of this is going to be lost on people. Not because people are stupid. Some people are just, they don't care. They're not educated. I don't mean in the sense of they didn't go to a school. That makes no difference to me. I mean that they haven't been properly informed or informed themselves, learned how this system works, understand the whys and the problems, and now there's a good possibility they're going to blame the wrong people and the wrong ideas for causing the problems, and of course, crediting something other than the actual solution to the problem, which in the long term is problematic because that's how we get ourselves into this problem. Now, I also think that there are people that are learning in real time, and they can compare and contrast. People that have bought into some of these lies, just like, again, with the Pacers analogy here, they bought into the lies that the Pacers couldn't compete, they didn't have the star power, whatever it is that these sports talk people, the people in the media, the people who talk about NBA stuff, how they've framed that argument. The Pacers can't compete. They can't put up the points. They can't play defense. They can't do this, that, or the other. They don't have the experience. No, the Pacers can. Now, that doesn't mean that they will. The Cavs could win the next 3. I don't think that's the case. I certainly hope it's not the case. But the bottom line is no one or very few people who were outside of Indianapolis thought the Pacers, or outside of basketball. If you watch the Pacers over the course of this season, you knew that when they played well, they can beat anybody. I mean that. They can beat anybody out there, for those who paid attention. For those who didn't and couldn't name the players because they're not necessarily big-name players, they think something different. And that's similarly what we're in with Trump. For those who pay attention, those who've studied politics objectively, those who are not here to push a radical leftist worldview on us, those who are just watching what happens, understanding that we have a tremendous opportunity, a tremendous roster, if you will, of people that are pushing in the right direction under the leadership of Trump. It starts with Trump, and I hope it doesn't end there, but I find myself wondering. But you got all these good things that are happening, and it's surprising to a lot of folks, just as it is surprising to a lot of folks that the Pacers are competing or up 3-1 here. I don't think it's surprising. I truly think, as a Pacers fan, the Pacers are the better basketball team. Now, that's not a popular take. People think that the Cavs are. The Cavs have the best player on the court with Donovan Mitchell. He went out last night with an ankle or maybe a calf injury. I think it was an ankle, but he has had a calf injury. Anyway, the bottom line here is that there's similarities. I'm happy for my Pacers. I'm even happier for my country with Trump. And so I want to move now into talking here about Trump. Before I do that, though, really quickly, my friends, this is going to be the last week. This is it. Last week, if you want to be a lifetime member of the Inner Circle, you have through Friday, which is May the 16th, to become a lifetime member. This is it. It's over and done with at that particular point. You can be a lifetime member of the Inner Circle, where we do all sorts of exclusive bonus content, behind-the-scenes stuff, really take some of the ideas and concepts and really try to build upon those and just provide a lot more value, things we can't necessarily do on here because of the format of the show and so forth. And I'm looking for people that are movers and shakers. It's not for everybody. And listen, it may not be for you. That's fine. We'll have, once we build out this program, there'll be an opportunity to become a member at a, for a few bucks a month sort of thing. I want to build this and make this as accessible to everybody. But if you want to be a part of it and shaping it, do some things with me behind the scenes. Lifetime membership offered to the Inner Circle. You'll be a founding member, $99. It's a one-time investment. You're in for life. If you're interested in that, ToddHuffShow.com/join would mean the world if you joined forces with us there. I will be there. We will do some things. ToddHuffShow.com/join is where you go to sign up. Last call. It's the last week, my friends, for that. All right. Now, all that being said, where I want to go next is what's happening with China, what's happening with pharmaceuticals, what's happening with Trump in general, what's happening with America being made great again, what's happening with America being put first again, and what's about to happen for all Americans who have been beaten to a pulp over the past 4 years in particular. We've already seen some of this materialize and manifest itself whenever Trump secured the border. Of course, we're still dealing with fallout about that. There's people who are, of course, fighting tooth and nail when it comes to the deportation of people who are in this country illegally. There were some of those things that even happened over the weekend. I don't know if I'll get to that, but these battles are not going to be over. There's still plenty of fight that needs to happen, plenty of things that need to happen on many, many fronts. But the way that we're engaging in these battles, the way that we're addressing these problems are dramatically different, night and day different than how they were under President Joe Bribery. And we're starting to reap the benefits of this. We're starting to see this. Now, let's start with China. Let's start with China. China is, of course, the trade imbalance, the trade war, the tariff war, whatever you want to call this. What's happening with China, we're at a pivotal moment in American history because this president has been working hard to get this deal fixed, the trade deal, trade in general, tariffs, the situation with China and with other countries, taken care of around the world. And he is addressing this head on. We've gone through some difficult times, and now we're sitting down with China. In fact, Trump announced over the weekend that China is, well, we both temporarily suspended, I think it was 115% of our respective tariffs, and there's the framework of a deal in place. There's a framework of a deal in place, and it will be beneficial. It will be beneficial to the American people, to the American economy. Now, as I've shared before, and I guess I'll do it again just to set this up. I just have a couple of minutes here. But as I've shared before, what makes Trump unique, and if you really want to understand Trump, and it's sad to say it's unique because it is, even though it shouldn't be, when it comes to the types of leaders that we have had. But Trump is an America First president. I've gone through this. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but it's important to note. If you want to understand why Trump is doing what Trump's doing, Trump always starts with the perspective, the viewpoint, what is in America's best interest? What's best for us? Which is crazy to me that people think he should be saying anything other than that. This is precisely what the president and all elected officials, by the way, of the United States government, it's precisely how they should behave. It's precisely what they all should do. But this is considered controversial amongst the radical left. I guess believing that Trump is supposed to look out for the interests of other folks before looking out for the interests of his own citizens. But that's not what Trump does. Trump does what he's supposed to do. Trump says, look, we've carried the burden, an unnecessary, unfair burden of the world's problems. The same thing, by the way, this is also evident in Trump's executive order when it comes to the pharmaceuticals, the drug prices, which Trump says are going to come down 59% virtually overnight. So, Trump says, I'm going to worry about America. Other countries can worry about themselves. I'm not trying to create havoc and turmoil for them, but I'm going to tell you this. If things have been easier for these other countries because the United States has been carrying too much of the load, we're going to address that problem. That's not the way that this is going to go any longer. That's what Donald Trump says. That's what you find at the root, at the core of all of Trump's decisions, what Trump's doing and what's happening. So I want to get into the China trade deal that's being worked out. The Dow, the markets are poised to have an explosively good day today and maybe even week and further out to come. We will see with time, my friends. I've got to take a break. Got to take a quick time out. You're listening here to Conservative Not Bitter Talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back, my friends. It's quite refreshing to have an America First president, and I'm glad that we do. And so far, this is still a developing story. It's still a developing story, but if this continues, headed down this path that we're on, expect good things. Expect marvelously good things for the American people, including, my friends, you. And again, I don't want to spend too much time here, but I think it is necessary. And I know I'm repeating myself for those of you who listen every day. I thank you for listening, but we got to keep in mind that some people are tuning in. They haven't started listening every day. And I know, shame on them. I'm kidding. But the truth is, we have to say this repeatedly. Part of the problem, part of the reason that we have the problems we have in this country is that we don't repeat the truth loudly and consistently enough. And when there is quiet, when there is not a truth being proclaimed in a certain area, whatever it is, whether it's economics, whether it's the role of government, whether it's national defense, whatever, when the truth is not proclaimed, a lie will fill the void. This is just the way that it is. It's just the way that it works. And so the truth must be proclaimed to drive out the lies. And the truth is the United States of America has been fundamentally a mess for a long time. This country, look, you go back in history. The founding of this country, on paper, we never should have been able to defeat the British and break away independently from them. That never should have happened on paper. You can compare this to the Pacers and Cavs if you want. That never should have happened. I don't see it that way, but some people think the Cavs should have never been down 3-1 to the Pacers on paper, meaning just looking at the pieces, it doesn't make sense, right? You wouldn't come to that conclusion. That's what some people think. And some people think that I would say most people think that on paper, the United States of America should have never been able to challenge successfully the greatest military power at the time with the British. Yet they did. There was something else that was at play here. They were pursuing something much greater than themselves, and we all have benefited from this. We all have reaped the benefits of being American. But as we began to unleash the full power of this American nation, because we embraced principles that were consistent with things that were good and true, we unleashed the creative and entrepreneurial spirit of the American people, because the founders did not say you are going to do what we tell you to do. You're going to be a servant or a subject of a new monarchy. No. You're going to be free people. In fact, you give us your consent on how you want to be governed. We'll craft this Constitution of the United States of America to tell the government what the government's going to do. And we're not going to tell you how to live. You're going to be free. In fact, you have liberties, certain unalienable rights that are given to you by your Creator. These were revolutionary ideas, my friends, that changed the scope, that changed the trajectory of the United States of America. And as we improved and as we continued to build and grow and prosper by embracing fundamental truth that the world has often neglected. Look, over the history of the world, my friends, people have been brutalized by their governments. People have been not allowed to be free. They've been viewed as subjects, as pawns, as assets, I guess, to the people running a nation. They live high on the hog. The rest of the people work hard and barely get by. That government will tell them what they need to survive, and that's how it's going to work. There's been oppressive leaders. There's been violent leaders. There's been pure evil that have led countries throughout the history of the world. This is something altogether different. America is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but to reject her goodness in the founding principles, the principles enshrined in our Constitution and our Declaration, to not accept that as good would be preposterous for one who knows the slightest bit about world history, about human nature, about how things have worked this side of heaven on this planet. And so as we grew and became more prosperous, as we eventually became powerful enough to be the world's sole superpower, which is where we are today, the world has taken advantage of the United States of America. And we've had politicians in office who have been far too eager to put the United States into positions where we would carry the lion's share of responsibility, whether that's the lion's share of responsibility in protecting the free world from enemies that are dark and evil, whether that's through financial obligations when it comes to things like fighting the climate crisis and all this sort of stuff. It doesn't matter what it is. The United States always has a heavier burden. They're always paying more. They're always having to give up more. And Trump says enough. And as I've said before, and I don't want to get too far down this path because I want to talk specifically of how that's being undone here. But Trump said enough of this. We're not going to allow this any longer. We're not going, because it's put heavy burdens upon the American family, the American taxpayer. I went through this recently where we talked about this, the burden that's placed on the taxpayer. I mean, I've said how many people would make different decisions if they had different circumstances. Well, listen, we all are responsible for our own financial choices. And I'm not here to say blame the government, but to say that the government hasn't had any impact on shaping the way that society functions today is beyond naive. It's beyond naive. The government has absolutely shaped the way that government works, that society works, I should say. They convinced a whole generation of women that motherhood was oppressive, that being a stay-at-home wife or mother is somehow a terrible thing. Now, that's changing. I see these young people on social media. I was telling my wife this the other day. There's a lot of women who want to be traditional wives, trad wives, as they like to. What they can call whatever they want. That's lost on me a little bit, but call it what you will. They can. They are realizing this. I've seen women on social media, who have who have kind of mocked or made fun of the feminist movement, and saying, you can take all those promises. My goodness, look at what you convinced me was bad. And listen, I'm not here. If you do what you want to do. I'm not saying you have to conform your life to fit whatever that you don't want it to be. That's not my job. I'm simply saying that the government had done a lot of things. The feminist movement came through and changed the way the family structure worked. And if you look at what's happened to the American family from that point in time with feminism, and listen, I'm not saying, I don't mean that the feminists, the radical feminists, are to blame for everything. There's been a bunch of weak men. There's been men that haven't been good leaders. There's plenty of blame to go around. But these things have torn apart at the fabric of our society to where now two-income families are necessary because of the way. Now, listen, we've chosen lifestyles that maybe sometimes we can't afford, and that's on us individually. But the bottom line is it's very, very hard to simply make it. I mean, rent is incredibly expensive. It's hard to buy a house for young people. It's a different world. It's a different world than when it was when I was becoming an adult. It's a different world than when my parents were becoming adults and buying a home. And it's a much different situation, much different world. And a lot of that's the result of the government pushing us in a direction with feminism, with the radical leftist ideology, with an America Last agenda. America was going to carry all sorts of the burden for the world. The government was going to heap more and more responsibilities upon the taxpayer, upon the worker. And it's exhausted the American worker. It's caused families to be broken apart. Listen, I know we're all responsible, again, for our choices. But to pretend that some of these factors that are influenced by the government and how the government operates and the tax code and all that, to pretend like that's not a factor on the American family, on broken homes, on single-parent households. Again, individual decisions. I'm not minimizing that at all. I'm simply saying that there are circumstances that are created that are pushing certain people in that direction to where it's a legitimate problem. And here we are. We have a president who isn't here can't fix every single one of those things. And of course, we have to fix the things that are on our list of to-dos. We got to make the right choices. But the idea that the American people are not going to be burdened unnecessarily any longer, that idea is coming. We're not going to have that any longer. The idea that the American people are going to carry the lion's share of all the problems, of solving all the problems of the world, is not, the jig is up, the time is up. So is this segment, my friends. Quick time out. You're listening here to Conservative Not Bitter Talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you want to get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back, my friends. Third and final segment, the first hour of the program. We'll get more specifically into China and the pharmaceutical executive order, the drug prices executive order that Trump, he's supposed to be, I haven't seen, I've started the show and everything else. I haven't seen it yet today. He's supposed to be signing that this morning, the executive order on drug prices. So we'll talk about those things on the other side of the hour. This is the last segment. I got to keep this short and sweet. Two things I want to do. First, I want to remind you about Freedom Marketplace. Freedom Marketplace, look, we've been talking about regaining control of our society. And we're fighting this battle on multiple fronts, as I've shared. And you know this. You've got the government, you've got the media, you've got academia, but you've also got big business. There's actually 7 pillars of propaganda. I didn't go through all of them, but you've also got big business. Woke business. And woke business was taking money that we were paying them, even are paying them, for products and services, and then using it to fund causes that we vehemently disagree with. Leftist causes, leftist candidates. And so we started Freedom Marketplace to do the opposite of that. We've given you businesses that are patriotic, America first businesses that are pushing in the same direction you are, places that you can give your hard-earned dollars for products and services, knowing that they have signed a pledge. Yes, my friends, signed a pledge saying that they will not support leftist candidates or leftist causes. If they do, they're off the directory. So, there's no strings attached. This doesn't cost you anything. It's just a place where you can find good patriotic businesses that are pushing in the same direction as we all are. Check it out today at freedommarketplace.net. That's freedommarketplace.net. Liberty and business for all, my friends. I mentioned feminism earlier, and I feel the need to do this in the final segment, especially since this is the day after Mother's Day. And I hope you had a wonderful Mother's Day. For those of you, or what was the other day you joked about yesterday? Birthing Person's Day. Maybe I should wish everyone a happy Birthing Person's Day. I'm kidding, but some people do that silly stuff. But I hope you had a happy Mother's Day weekend for the mothers out there. We spent the day with my family, and I'm reminded of the impact that my mother had upon me. My mom stayed home with my brother and I. There's just the two of us. She stayed home with us when we were young kiddos. When we got a little bit older, she started a part-time job, but she was always there. She was the homeroom mom. I tell people, I lived a little bit of the Leave It to Beaver lifestyle as a kid. And it had nothing to do with me. Please don't misunderstand. I had a wonderful childhood. I had people in my life that cared for me, starting first and foremost with my mother and my dad. Dad would coach us. He worked, I've shared with you, he worked at Allison Gas Turbine, eventually became Rolls-Royce. He was a union representative there, Local 933. But he would always be our coach us in sports, throw ball with us in the backyard. I just had parents that cared for us. And my mom, she was always there. She was always at the field trips. She was always at the class parties. She was always involved in keeping us in line. My mom was a loving mother, is a loving mother, but she also had rules, and she expected you to follow them. By the way, I never had to worry. I know some kids tell me that their moms would say, wait till your dad comes home. That didn't happen in this household. In fact, I think we were less fearful of dad than mom. You knew what mom expected. And I was blessed by this. In fact, I remember I remember going to college. And in fact, there's another woman who was very instrumental in my life, who I considered like a kind of a spiritual mentor of sorts, a spiritual type of, I'm careful how I say this because God's our Father, and I don't mean that she was like a spiritual mom, but you know what I mean, like someone who was motherly to me, who taught me things about the Bible and about faith in Jesus. And her name's Lori, and she was a stay-at-home mom and reminded me a lot of my mother too. And when I think about these women, my mom and Lori, and stay-at-home stay-at-home mothers, some that the millions of others I didn't know. But I know I've seen it up close and personal with how we do it now with my wife, staying home and sacrificing and loving and teaching our children. But I remember in college, I'll never forget this, there was a debate in class, as there often was, and one of the young ladies in class said something about, I don't want to grow up, basically, and just be a stay-at-home mom. That was the phrase, because it hit me like it was a punch in my face. Why are you talking about my mom that way for? Why are you talking about my dear friend Lori that way for? These are women who, you talk about women I respect and admire and love with all my heart. These are them. And I said to her, what do you mean just a stay-at-home mom? I said, it used to be said the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Now it's just a stay-at-home mom. Are you kidding me? You got to be kidding me. And there's been a whole generation of women, or a whole group of women across many generations, who have bought into that lie. Motherhood is a wonderful, a beautiful thing, an incredibly important thing. In fact, if we want to change our society, it's idiotic to think that we can do it without changing people individually. That's why ultimately I say the solution in this country is a spiritual reawakening to the truth of the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. But it starts in a lot of ways with those relationships that are established between mother and child. So that's what I had. Happy Mother's Day. Gotta go, SDG.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.